We are joined today by David Johnston, who is the Manager of Intelligent Automation and Process Excellence at Heritage Bank. Could you talk a little bit about Heritage Bank and give us some background on that business?
So Heritage Bank is a mutual bank, a credit union, similar in the States. That means we're owned by our customers. We do banking Australia-wide. We've got 60 branches, $10 billion of assets under management, and I think we are Australia's largest customer-owned bank.
Wow. We're going to start by talking about why automate now. So what put you on the path to automation at Heritage Bank?
So we've been on the journey a fair while now, actually. I guess my first introduction was a glossy flyer I got, and I have to be honest, I was a bit of an RPA skeptic at that moment. Our external auditors, who are now a partner of UiPath, they offered to our CEO and COO to do a session on RPA with a few people in the bank who knew a lot about processes. That basically landed with me. I spent a couple of days sort of looking at processes and looking at RPA, and that was just before Christmas. And that was a really excellent session. I came back from that thinking there is a place for RPA, for a set of processes in the bank. So when we got back from Christmas holidays, I'd just been restructured, as happens in banking, and there was a bit of an opportunity to have a look. We found a Forrester wave at the time. We started working down through that wave until we found someone that sort of looked like they're about the right tier for Heritage at the time. I reached out. We ended up doing a proof of concept with Christian, who I know is still with UiPath, and 4 or so years later, we've got about 110 processes automated now. It's a huge part of the operations of the bank, and we use it all over the place in a lot of processes, customer facing and back office.
Speak about 4 years in RPA. That's a long time. You really are a pioneer in the space. So if you go back to that time, what were you looking to accomplish? Why did you bring it into Heritage Bank? What were you looking to do there?
Yeah, it's interesting. The challenges then are very similar to the challenges now. We had a bunch of processes that really weren't scalable. The company's been growing, payments growing exponentially, and so therefore, as a result of that, we're seeing these processes that were struggling to deal with these increasing volumes. We didn't want to be investing really heavily into more of the mundane, not very rewarding work. And so we really were looking for another path out of that problem. We certainly also were facing into a problem about trying to make our operations 24/7, where previously we were very, very tied at the time. We were very tied to the business hours that the teams kind of could work reliably at a bank our size.
David, we've heard from many of our customers and partners that this coronavirus pandemic has either kick-started or been a catalyst for expanding their automation program. What's the impact been on Heritage Bank?
I can definitely understand that. We certainly had to use automation to help in a range of processes, sort of a couple of months ago because of coronavirus. And while Australia, from a health perspective, is in a wonderful position now, the reality is that the economic challenge will remain. That's making us look for ways. This is our first day of the new financial year. That's really made us look for ways to try and find some more capacity in the bank, try and make it a more rewarding place to work from an organizational effectiveness perspective. And we are, of course, facing the challenge of people who are remote, like myself and many others have been in the bank over the last little while. So how do we keep that productivity high in the bank, try to, in a really cost-effective way, be able to reinvest back into the bank and navigate some of the challenges in processes that have really had scale far beyond what we had ever planned for. I don't know if you'd like a specific example, but I'll touch on one quickly. Hardships processing at the bank. We usually, prior to coronavirus, we were receiving 20 hardship applications per month. And in a fortnight, as we entered some of our lockdown phases early in Australia, sort of in March, we received 1,600 in a fortnight. So that process definitely wasn't set up for that, and certainly, we formed around that problem as a bank, with staff from our retail branches and elsewhere, but absolutely, supported by automation to try and deal with that workload, which far in advance of whatever expected.
So it sounds like you had some specific immediate use cases that were specific to the coronavirus pandemic, and adapted to that. But then also there's a adjustment that needs to be made in the business because of the long-term effects of the pandemic that you're using automation to deal with as well, right?
Yep, that's definitely the case. So there was a couple of specific cases, Hardships 1, some business banking guarantee loans that we launched to the market really quickly, and actually a process we took from the UiPath APAC team and adjusted to check in with our staff, a wellbeing check-in that we're doing every fortnight. So those were the coronavirus cases, but the legacy of that and the legacy we'll still see from coronavirus is we're going to have a tough budget year, and we've now got 4 years behind us proving that UiPath and automation generally is a really cost-effective way for us to improve our processes, to improve our customer experience, to and to make our staff's lives more rewarding, get them to work on higher value work.
We're learning that that speed is something that's more important now than ever before, and we're hearing that. Do you have a point of view on that? Are you finding that to be the case as well?
Yep, I absolutely agree with that statement as well. This is, we speak a lot about digital transformation, and certainly, the automation's been a part in Heritage's digital transformation over the past couple of years, and it will be over the next couple of years as well. The difference, I notice now, and I've been at the bank 13 years. I started as a project manager in IT before moved into process improvement. The difference I see now is absolutely in the quantum of change we're trying to do and the velocity that we're trying to do that change at. And it is one of the really appealing parts of UiPath as a platform. You can take ideas and you take process problems, and you can address them in the tool in a very agile and a truly agile way. Where you can launch pieces of process and then extend, add more functions and features, until you get sort of the outcome you needed to get. And really, if I look at that Hardships one as an example, I think in the end we launched 8 pieces of process to build an end-to-end process. And when that was all together, that was, that's become, for at least for a portion of them, a very straight-through automated process, which is amazing given, that all happened over the space of only a few weeks, really. We see similar processes in disputed transactions and elsewhere. We've, started with a piece of a process and then extended that, right through to where it's potentially right in front of a customer with a contact center service agent, using an attended bot form to capture details really quickly from our core banking system from our customer to load a disputed transaction, through into the back office straight through process, which we put in about 6 months or so now ago.
Yeah, that's amazing. That agility that you're talking about. I think there's very few technologies that give you the ability to react that quickly. And paired with that, the other facet that automation and specifically RPA is bringing to the companies responding to the pandemic is increased resiliency. We hear that a lot too. hardening our processes, making sure that, the next time, hopefully nothing like this happens again. But, in the event of anything that becomes, systemic or, disruptive to this extent, we have resilient processes. Would you say that's relevant to Heritage Bank as well?
Yep, absolutely. I think we've seen that. I mean, and so we've been doing this for 4 years now, and some of those processes that we've automated early on have absolutely already had a major improvement in resilience. You can just imagine. I mean, the very first process was one, and I've spoken about it before, processing direct debits that have come through from gyms or similar, PayPal as well, through to customers' accounts where, for whatever reason, there's not sufficient funds in that account for the customer. There could be funds in a different account. There could be funds that come in a payment credit file later on in the day. And so, we give a time frame for those transactions to be managed. That process used to take 4 people to manage those rejects every day. And from a resilience perspective, having those 4 people who now all couldn't work together as easily as they were. The way they used to hand out work was actually by getting a stack of line printer paper and separating that into, the 4 different operators or 5 different operators, however many were in the office that day. I mean, that just would not have worked in that mode when everyone, really rapidly picked up their computers and went home.
We had a customer who said, when everything hit at once, the processes that required paper are the ones that failed. The ones that were digitized kept running. And that's really where it drew the line for them. Like, we really need to reduce the paperwork. So your printed line example is exactly what we used to
do. We sort of said in the bank at the time, and I remember saying to one of the UiPath partners here in Australia, the processes that the robots were working on, well, they didn't get impacted at all because of coronavirus. And they don't really get impacted by too many other business continuity events either. I completely agree with resilience. I have, for my sins, had to manage business continuity in the bank previously, and I much prefer the world we're in now, to be honest with you.
So David, is automation a C-level imperative at your organization, and do you think it's something that is particularly important for the C-level and boards to care about now?
Yeah, well, just in the last fortnight, actually, last Thursday, I presented at the board meeting about automation, and then the Wednesday prior to that, I presented at the Senior Executive Group Investment Committee. And these are about our plans around how automation is supporting our transformation streams, capacity to reinvest, and org effectiveness, organizational effectiveness. So it is absolutely a C-level imperative in the bank. We've just restructured our team again into the transformation office, so report through to the chief transformation officer now. That's a sign of where we see automation from a level of importance as far as achieving that digital transformation that's occurring in the bank.
Wow, I love when our customers get to present what they're doing to the board. It means that something is we're doing something right here. I want to move and transition to talking about some more operational advice that we can give others. How do you decide what processes are going to be automated? How do you make those decisions?
Yeah, well, that's matured over the journey for sure, and we're in a better position to do that a bit more strategically than we ever have. I mean, early on, we just identified this opportunity or these early opportunities, and that was a very bottom-up kind of approach, particularly once we'd found that first one and had the success that we had. Opportunities from that area of the bank, kept coming. The guys that worked on those projects, whose jobs, got instantly, nearly better overnight after we implemented that, and they had, more time to work on customer-facing problems and service requests and higher value work more generally. They found plenty of other low value work that they'd rather not be doing. And that really built our early pipeline in RPA off the back of that first success. The word of that spread around the organization, and certainly through that bottom up mode, we were able to absolutely find more work than we could do. And really the discussion then became around prioritization. We leveraged off processes that were already in the bank around prioritizing other project work. So we just hooked into that and used the same criteria. It's not perfect. I will say that wasn't perfect because of a few factors. Firstly, in automation in UiPath, we release often and release a lot. Our processes really weren't set up for getting those incremental benefits. They're not how the business cases were discussed. We certainly had to support that process with a bit of an automatability assessment, to make sure that the processes we were taking on we could do. But, this is really what's changed, these two factors. Now, from an automatability perspective, really, if you look at the way the platform's evolved, the extra capability that's been added to it, processes that we once probably would have steered clear of because of their scale or complexity or the inability to find the clear rule set, to build into RPA. Those are all on the table for us now. With some of the intelligent document processing, with AI Fabric and similar. The other thing that's really changed is the way that, because it's become such an important part of our digital transformation, we are far more selective in the projects we want to go after. We now look at those much from a top-down angle. So we're looking at areas where we see, if we stand back and look at the bank a bit more, where we see groups of people that are doing quite repetitive work or, process problems that, are being impacted by scale, because we're now confident that we can really go after any of those processes, we can really, decide which are the best ones to go after, the ones that are most aligned, to those couple of strategic pillars I've discussed and the ones that can get a good business case.
Just to drill into that for just a second more, Can you talk a little bit? I know just because I know that you've been looking at AI and RPA, the combination of those two for a while, and you've been experimenting there. How is Heritage Bank looking to leverage AI with RPA?
Well, there's lots of opportunities, and there has been for a while. The first set that we took on were have been around that transaction classification kind of problem. And that pattern we've used in things like credit assessment, supporting that to be more effective because, previous processes around living expense assessment where, people had to go through the core banking system, copy out a whole bunch of lines worth of transactions, and then look at those lines and decide what expense category that transaction was. It wasn't very fun. And, from an AI perspective, it's still, unfortunately, there's not enough data in the Australian payment network to do that classification perfectly and to identify which of those transactions are a one-off sort of special purchases versus something that's part of someone's living expenses. So really, that's where AI has come in. It'd be a very complex rule set to try and build manually, but being able to apply machine learning to that transaction classification kind of problem, given you've got large amounts of data and given our people have gone and done some classification of those, that gave us a really good rule set, a really good data set, to be able to turn into a model. That similar transaction problem happens when you're looking at financial crimes. Is this transaction that's just come through at 11 o'clock at night, is that a real transaction or is that a card that's been compromised is being used online? And again, there's absolutely a use case for machine learning in that space, and absolutely a use case for RPA to be able to take action on those alerts in the middle of the night, where, again, at our size, it hasn't necessarily been a 24/7 process all the time. I see another opportunity for us now in AI land where some of the automations where we didn't get 100% automation because of the complexity of rules, well, again, through the RPA and the work we've done, we've now built the data set that can be used to close that gap further. And the other thing that's really interesting to see is the investment in intelligent document processing. And that does unlock a bunch of processes which, for no fault of our own, for the way the industry works, or the way customers prefer to work, they still do generate paper or scanned documents, and we want to be able to digitize those effectively and take those back into our automated processes. Those are the big ones, for sure.
David, do you have a centralized center of excellence? And what do you think about the importance of centralizing automation across the organization?
Look, I guess, like, on the surface, to answer the second part somewhat, I don't think any particular path is destined for failure or destined for success. In our case, we have a centralized center of excellence, and the positives that come from a centralized center of excellence is you've got people working closely together all the time. You can mature quickly. You can learn from each other. And as you're learning the tools, you're learning about the processes of the bank. You build knowledge faster just because everyone is working together really effectively. That's harder to do with a decentralized approach, but not impossible, I guess, if you've got good practices in KM and collaboration. The disadvantage, I guess, of the decentralized model is it can feel like, the automation people are doing this to us rather than sort of doing it with us. And that's something we need to be really conscious of, when we engage, to make sure that the people that are the experts in this process, the people that own these processes and will continue to own these processes, once they've been automated, are on the journey with us. And we're not a special little island over there that's doing this, and that's something we're certainly navigating through, and we'll continue to kind of navigate through. We have had a fair bit of success training various people outside of our Centre of Excellence in some of the tools, and it's something we're certainly looking at as a further opportunity for us. At the moment, we've been pretty ad hoc and opportunistic, I guess, in who we've identified, and you make a strong argument given, some of those people we have trained have been successful in getting processes implemented, that we should go broader, more strategic, more scalable in the way we do that.
So David, talking a little bit further about involving the employees in the automation program. So you talked about being selective with the people who are getting started. Does that mean that they are building their own automations, or are they working with the automations that are provided by the COE through their desktop, through a robot assistant on their desktop?
Yep.
How does that work?
We've got everything, to be honest with you. I would say at this point, realistically, every single staff member at Heritage, their lives are impacted by RPA in some way. And that might be in a really simple way, like they see notes in the CRM from processing that the bots have done, or they see our new starters, our anniversaries, our promotions are all congratulated on our corporate social feeds by the robots. So at the very least, everyone sees the names that we have for our robots. They see them doing work, and they'd be touched by that in some way or another. The next group of people is certainly in the contact center, where they do run the attendant bots, the agent desktops and similar. They are obviously, giving work to and from robots, more than most, with the forms and similar. So that's certainly a group that is engaged in that way. Where we've trained in the past, Diego, we've really had people that have put their hand up and been interested. Those people so far have come from HR, contact center, retail network, technology, and risk. And so people in those areas have come to us and said, hey, I'd like to learn a bit more about this. And we, supported them with the Studio client at the time, and more recently one with Studio X in finance. To get started and start building automations. A lot of those people did get automations built, and then, with the support of our team, got those into production. So that's really positive. We're now just getting started, actually, with Automation Hub in the bank, and we're focused in on those areas that I've spoken about, which we think are top-down opportunities, areas where we see clusters of process or bigger processes that we can go after. And we're actually engaging with champions and people in those business units and processes, to do those assessments, or to submit those ideas in Automation Hub. And that's really the next part of the journey, to bring more people into building that pipeline, and then to bring more people into training the processes.
We want to give really tangible ideas so that people can get traction and they can see that this is totally doable. So, David, how did you roll out automation across Heritage Bank? How did you get started?
I got started in 3 WebEx sessions, 3 nights in a row with Christian from Romania. He helped us build our first proof of concept with me. It was sort of 4:30 in the afternoon in Queensland and 7:30 in the morning in Romania, which Christian seemed much tighter at 7:30 in the morning than I do at this 7:30 in the morning. But I think that's probably a way the Romanian time, where the work times of Romania is quite different from Australia, I think. Look, that's how I got started. But the fundamental principle there is the tool sets are very approachable. We're so fortunate now. If you're getting started right now, we're so fortunate with what's available from UiPath, from the Community Edition, Cloud Orchestrator as well. Those things can really help people get started taking on a first process. I think the biggest challenge there is probably not so much about the tools and learning it. I think the key is to find that killer first process, which we were really fortunate and did, which really then provided a lot of momentum and a lot of impetus really to keep going and do more, and helped us build that early pipeline and get ongoing wins. I think if I look at those early days, we had some wonderful support from our COO where we were at the time, who was a true supporter of the work that was going on. He helped us drive the change in operations. He helped us, navigate that exec table and similar, and help us build the case. We very quickly, having had such a good first process, it was relatively easy to build the business case. And I do think one of the important things we did was, we did see customers at the time, or people at the time, were just deploying robots. They didn't have Orchestrator, and I think that caused a lot of problems. We didn't do that. We always had Orchestrator, and we always had a plan to go and implement multiple robots. I am on record in a Heritage interview actually about automation going, I doubt that we'll ever have more than 5 back office robots. Because in our model, really, we have lots of processes being run on really regularly throughout the day, and on less bots. So we're not a scale which has lots of bots per process. We're a scale that has lots of processes per bot. I was totally wrong. I mean, we've just implemented the 12th. And really, I think that just shows how fast the market has moved, how fast the opportunity has happened. And that really speaks to the speed that you can deliver, with automation as well. That, predictions that I had, and I was comfortably wrong within 12 months, pretty regularly, as I was looking forward in RPA. But fortuitously, I was kind of always wrong in a way that we exceeded what we thought we were going to do.
What is the definition of a killer process? We've heard things like processes that everyone understands, that's visible, that people can kind of relate to. In your mind, what is a killer process?
Well, I mean, as I say, our first one was definitely a killer process. It absolutely was one that people could understand. I explained it to you just before, the direct debit problem. People could understand that was something that we have to do as a bank. It's something that we do, being nice, providing good customer service. We're giving more time to try and sort out the accounts. We're trying to dishonor less payments. And we don't want to overdraw accounts unnecessarily. So people can understand that's a good thing to do. It was nice that it had such a tangible prop insofar as a stack of line printer paper like this. that we could wave around and show that we no longer needed. That was helpful. The key had also as a process, it also had some really good benefits, and those were quite easy to articulate. Insofar as, we could show, we knew the amount of people who were working on it, and we knew that wasn't particularly satisfying work, and their survey results that we could do could show that their life was much better once we changed it. Secondly, we found out that we were actually pretty inconsistent, and there was actually a risk problem that came from this process. As we dived in, there probably wasn't the set of standard operating procedures as there kind of should be around making these decisions. And as a result, it actually was at times a bad customer experience because, 1 month your payment would come through and be treated this way, and then the next month it would come through and something different would happen because a different person looked at it, or they were in a different mood. And so it was nice to be able to tie it to the customer in that way. And then we were fortunate that we also found that there was a bottom line impact from this, in addition to the efficiency, because of the inconsistencies as well. And, so having a process like this, which is, can provide some benefits that people can understand. It's a process that people can understand, and ideally, is close enough to the customer that it won't really directly impact them, but people can see how it does. That was a positive.
You guys are starting to integrate more and more in AI, but you didn't start there. You started with something that was pretty, rules-based and routine, but just quite prominent.
In the end, it's, while the rule set wasn't written down, it wasn't that hard to understand. You could navigate through that, define those rules. You could get a really strong automation rate. We got 92%, really, with about, half a dozen or maybe 10 rules. So having achieved something like that where, while it felt like at the time it was a big, challenging project, I do often say, I've said it to my team even just in the last couple of weeks, if we had to do that project again with the capabilities and knowledge we have now, it would be something that we'd do in a couple of weeks probably. Whereas it took much longer the first time as we were learning the tools and getting started. I say much longer, but it was still very quick by technology project terms. I mean, we're talking a couple of months to automate a process, and that means learning the whole thing. That's still quick. It's just not quick compared to what we do now.
Looking back, what's the one thing you wish you knew going into it, or a piece of advice you can give others getting into it now that they should avoid, that you learned, maybe the hard way?
I think I'll pick on two really quickly. The importance of making sure process owners own their processes, and from an RPA perspective, what that means is we need them engaged in that journey, and we need them, comfortable getting data on the performance of the process afterwards and being able to manage from that. So being able to build those good process owner skills is something that's really important. I do think the other thing that you need to address is around that robotics operations monitoring. I mean, this is work, and this work is going to change. The systems we use will change. And while it's probably been way more resilient than we thought it was, it's really important to detect any problems really quickly and have the capacity to look at those and rectify them. It's important from the the branding of the automation program to be able to to not be having lots of failures and lots of times when things aren't working. So it's important to sort of focus on that robotic operations monitoring, if not straight away, certainly early on.
Let's talk about culture for a second, because it does. You've touched on it earlier. How do you create a culture that is open to automation and that prioritizes automation?
We were really lucky in that first process, or maybe it wasn't luck. That area of the organisation, that area of the bank, had competing processes demands, and it had a number of processes that were probably getting out of control. And so we didn't have to go in and try and do a FT harvest or something, hand out redundancies. That was important from that change management story, that we're going to automate this low value work. We're going to free you up to do the more complex decision making work over here in visa disputes at the time. and people could get on board, really easily with that story. And so I guess it comes back to the first few processes, having a good story about how people's lives are better, and having done that, then that area of the bank where we did our first process is by far the biggest user of automation still today. They have more processes, we do more runtime for them, they probably find more opportunities as well than anywhere else in the bank. And that's the key. If we can build an area that really understands it, that finds that set of processes, that walk the talk around being able to demonstrate that their jobs are better now and their work is more enjoyable now, and they're able to work on higher value things. That's a really good story from a change management perspective.
How will you ultimately measure the success of your automation programs? Do you look at specific metrics, or just how do you generally look back? Will you generally look back and say, you were successful or
not? At an initiative level, we're just trying to do the good process management work. I mean, we should be able to show what the cycle time of processes were, and have they been improved, what the cost per unit was, and has that been reduced. I mean, those are the good standards around, at an initiative level. There is a set of initiatives that are quite small and are really there about, because you're not going to get a cost per unit improvement in, welcoming new starters on the intranet, but I'd still make the argument that was really important culturally.
Right.
So in that case, when you look at the program more broadly, really what we're looking at is work avoided by human work avoided. So we look at, how many FTE, how many people we need to bring in to do the work that's currently now being done in robotics. And we look at that, and I'll just say an interesting thing on that metric. We look at what was in the bank before and has been automated, and also we look at what is new work that came in and went straight to automation. And actually, we have more in that than in the work that was automated from the bank. So we've actually now done.
Oh, wow.
We've done a lot of new processes, or processes we couldn't do at the level beforehand, or we couldn't do 24 hours a day that we now can. Actually, we have more work that's new work than was actually automated work, automated existing work. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's a what's the KPI for that? How do you quantify that? I'm just curious. It's such an interesting.
Yeah. So we deal with the running time of processes. We look at the processes as they were beforehand, and then how much faster or slower the robots are than the humans. Most of the time they're faster, but there's the occasional process where we do it the slow way because it's also the more reliable way. We then look at that on a monthly basis, and then we also classify those as to how much was new work versus how much was existing work. And then we calculate that back as an FTE number. And we've got a dashboard, a real-time dashboard actually, that shows that, which is, again, I think one of the things that's been lucky. So that's one of the metrics we care about. We do the other things that, from an operations monitoring perspective, that I think a lot of people would do around monitoring the runtime, the transactions, the number of jobs, and that sort of thing. But those stats don't really mean that much outside of us running the program. We're now certainly starting to look, as we look at that, those more strategic initiatives, look at organizational effectiveness. What we're really wanting to see is, a cultural improvement. We do have surveys in the organization, a lot of places do, where, we're looking at org effectiveness and similar. We've only just had our results from that over the course of the last month, this one. And, we've seen a marked improvement in areas that we've done a significant amount of automation work from their people, culture, stats. So that's a wonderful measure. Now, we won't ever be able to attribute that totally to RPA, but there's really no doubt in anyone's mind that that's been a contributor into improving the people culture results in those areas that we've done a lot of work. And it just stands to reason, because the work that the guys do now is high value. It's more interesting, and it's not retyping things from spreadsheets into core banking systems or similar. There's no doubt that if I look at the organisation now, it just feels like a better place than it was. And if you walk through some of these operations teams that would come back after a public holiday and that have 12 people in trying to get them through a backlog of transactions that have come in over the long weekend, and they all look stressed and they're doing very boring work. There's no doubt if you're able to walk through those teams, you get a very different vibe. And that's probably the most interesting thing for me. But it's nice that we've got a set of financials and efficiency measures and a set of risk measures to talk about as well.
Forrester recently put out a report called "The COVID-19 Crisis Will Accelerate Enterprise Automation Plans." And one of the things that they stated was one of the lasting legacies of the pandemic will be a renewed focus on automation. Do you agree with this? And if so, why?
So one of the lasting legacies of a pandemic will be a renewed focus on automation. Certainly from our perspective, we have seen automation play a critical part in pandemic response. We see it playing an important part as we deal with the economic fallout that will happen, unfortunately, over the next 12 months plus, as a really cost-effective, powerful technology for improving our processes.
Another Forrester quote from the same paper. Forrester says business and technology leaders will continue to invest in emerging intelligent automation technologies to increase the resiliency and adaptiveness of the business. Do you think automation increases business resiliency? How so?
Do I think automation increases business resilience? I do. We have better data about the execution of processes than we had previously. We have absolute confidence that transactions and processes have been done, whereas before potentially that data was hidden in a spreadsheet or an email or similar kind of data. We now, through the processes that have been automated, we absolutely know whether they're run or not, and that's a good starting point from a business resilience perspective.
Next question. Forrester predicts that automation will become, and has already become, a boardroom imperative. Why should automation be a boardroom imperative?
Why should automation be a boardroom imperative? Because it's a really powerful way of improving the operations of organization, and it touches on and it improves aspects that as board directors we should really care about. We absolutely want to see strong governance. Automation supports strong governance to that, around data, execution, knowledge. It supports risk reduction. It supports good process ownership and good ownership of process. And probably more importantly than all of those, it supports good customer experience by being able to do things 24/7, be able to do processing, whenever a customer needs it in a really scalable way.
We have heard from many of our customers that automation can drive cultural change in the organization. How do you think automation can drive cultural change?
How does automation drive cultural change? From our perspective, we've seen it transition the skills of our bank. We've seen new people that weren't software developers, that weren't process analysts, being able to learn RPA and be able to automate their processes. That automation of process done by us or done by others has improved culture as well by taking away some of the very mundane, repetitive work and allowing people to work on higher value, more customer-centric tasks.
We've heard from many companies that automation can help them build a competitive advantage. Do you agree?
Is it possible to use automation to drive competitive advantage? Yes. It's a fast technology to implement positive change in organizations. It has allowed us, to implement products, processes in a really rapid, really agile way, just by leveraging the existing systems that are in the bank, in an automated way to provide new products and features.